Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome CEO Sojern, Mark Rabe, in discussion with research editor Skift X, Jeremy Cressman.
You right there. Have a seat.
Thank you so much.
All right. So today we're going to talk a little bit about multi-channel marketing, aren't we? Just a reminder for everybody again, if you have questions, please input them on Slido through the app or the website. Mark, so you're the CEO of Sojern. As some people in the audience may know, that's a data-driven advertising platform. Is that correct?
It is indeed.
So you know a few things about multi-channel marketing, I take it?
We know a little bit about multi-channel marketing, yes.
Awesome. Okay. Well,
is that the softball?
You got to start with something easy, right? So you've been working in marketing and advertising for a really long time, right? I mean, both of us have. What's changed in this industry? Just what's the biggest change you've seen between now and when you started?
Boy, a lot has changed. So a long time really is a long time. I've been doing this for closing in on 20 years at this point. And I think probably the biggest change is just it's constantly changing. It's constantly evolving. So early on in my kind of digital career, I cut my teeth at a company called Overture, which was the pioneer of pay-per-click search. Google obviously got into that market and kind of steamrolled us, but not before we were bought by Yahoo, and got my feet wet on the display side of the ecosystem, which was really interesting to see how search and display, started to work together. And display has had this incredible evolution over the last, call it 10-ish years, particularly from the perspective of data-driven targeting. So really understanding when consumers are in market for a specific good or product, and then being able to target them with the right offer at the right time. So many of the things that we learned over on the search side of the house, we could then apply very quickly to display. And in travel, it's even more interesting because you have all of these other potential channels to reach those customers, like meta search, which is a big one and still relatively new. Certainly on the OTA side, we recently acquired a company called Addphorus, which is in the Facebook space, and Facebook is such a massive platform and a very new platform that they chose just to focus on travel, and are working hand in glove with Facebook to figure out how you decode, that huge platform of 2 billion users on Facebook to the end of travel. So the pace of change and the consistent change, I think, is probably the most interesting piece.
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned Addphorus, so maybe that's a good place for us to move next. So you bought this company at the end of last year. What do they do?
In Istanbul, Turkey.
In Istanbul.
Very
so you were explaining the name
to
me, right? It's advertising and Bosporus, right?
Yep.
Because they're based in Istanbul, the Bosporus.
And they can see the Bosphorus River from their office.
And why did you decide to acquire these guys instead of trying to build the capabilities that they offered in-house? Like, what do they do, and why the strategic thinking there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. For two principal reasons. The first is really just focus. So, we're still a relatively small company. We're edging up on maybe 500 employees globally. So we don't have the resources to really bring to bear on everything that we want to do. And Facebook is complicated. It's a really interesting kind of beast, and they have evolved over time to serve many different industries in many different ways. And what we found with Addphorus is they just were laser focused on how to crack the code on Facebook for travel companies, right? So how can I drive more bookings for suppliers, also for OTA and meta search companies, using that Facebook platform? So as we kind of stepped back, we said, hey, why don't we partner with these guys? Let's really understand how the platform works. We'll use it ourselves. And we became a reseller for them in that partnership. So we were pushing people over to Addphorus. And over time, we got to know the team, loved them. The product and the engineering group were top rate and fantastic people to work with. And it just became obvious they had a lot of skills and proprietary DNA over on the Facebook side.
Right.
That married up very nicely with what we had built in terms of multi-channel with display and search. Now we brought Facebook into the fold.
Sure. Okay. So we just talked about Facebook. Obviously, I would be remiss to talk about multi-channel marketing with also going to Google. You guys work with both of these companies. Is that, if I'm in the travel industry and I'm looking to figure out my marketing strategy, are these my main two options? I mean, how is the landscape there changing? Are we seeing any new competitors come in, opportunities to work with other advertising platforms that are becoming really important or you think might be becoming important?
Yeah, they're certainly the two biggest, that's for sure. So I think successful companies in the marketing sphere of travel need to figure out how to work with both Google and Facebook. And I think the ones that will be the most successful can figure out how to bridge those two platforms and create something that's unique that sits on top of those. And that's primarily what we've been sort of driving at as the evolution of Sojern has played out. I think in terms of new platforms, certainly Amazon is really interesting.
Amazon.
Yep. Excuse me. I told Jeremy I have this cold. So
I'd offer your Kleenex if I had one.
Yeah.
Grab some water. All good.
Give me 1 second. So I think Amazon is probably the most interesting new entrant into the space. I don't know how many people have kind of kept tabs on the advertising business within Amazon, but it's huge. It's by their Q1 earnings report was like $2 billion in advertising revenue.
Really?
Which for retailers is usually kind of the slow quarter. By Q4, we think that maybe that's like a $10 billion ad platform. And guess what? Amazon has a ton of data on people around the world, many of whom are travelers.
I'm sure. What are there particular sectors in the travel space that should be looking at an Amazon versus going to a Google or Facebook, or still too early to say?
Yeah, I think probably all of them. Right, so to the extent you're a supplier or you're an OTA or a meta search company, an intermediary, I think what Amazon has been building, and we don't work with them yet, we're kind of early conversation, but I think what they're building is going to be super powerful. They've recruited a really solid team. They have owned and operated inventory. They've got a wealth of data on just about everybody who comes to Amazon. I mean, when I step back and I think about what they know about our family, they've got our purchase behavior for the last 10 years, maybe longer. Amazon Prime, like they know more about my family than I probably do in terms of purchasing behavior, which is super powerful when you think about applying that to the targeting and making sure you're getting the right offer in front of the right person at the right time.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that brings us to another highly relevant topic for today, which is personalization. You know, obviously, so much of what we do as marketers, especially in the digital space, depends on having this knowledge customer, personalizing the advertising creative that's being displayed to them. How do you strike the right balance today? You know, privacy being the other side of that. What's the give and take there that you guys have established?
Yeah. So I think you're right. It's two sides of the same coin. So really driving down personalization means that you're using increasingly more data about those customers. And to the extent that is an open and transparent exchange, I'm providing this data so you can serve me relevant offers in travel, for example, then that's great. To the extent it's not, then it starts to get a little bit creepy. So the recent evolution of GDPR in Europe,
of course,
and like regulation that's playing out around the rest of the world, we think is great because that transparent nature allows you to be even better with respect to the personalization and to drive increasingly more relevant offers to those customers. So we're huge proponents of that initiative.
Another big topic that we've really noticed taking hold is automation. You know, so much of how advertising is bought and sold now is not someone calling someone else on the phone. It's, you know, algorithms. It's software, right? How do you think that's changing the industry? Are you seeing an impact on measurement, for example?
Oh, sure. It's changing the industry in many ways. I think measurement's one of them. So kind of the migration from last click attribution to multi-touch attribution is probably the most obvious.
Do you think we should stop for a second and explain to people what that is? I don't. Basically, you think about using the last place someone clicked to be indicative of whether that advertising worked versus using multiple touch points, maybe earlier in the customer journey, right?
Yeah, which ironically we helped pioneer at Overture, right? Because it was like the original pay-per-click model, and hey, if I'm sending you the click, then just calculate what the the total revenue was and divide the marketing spend into that. That's your ROI. And that worked for a long time. It still works really well for Google. But over time, I think very sophisticated marketers woke up to the fact that, you know what, if I give all of the credit to that last click, be it off of search or somewhere else, then you're discounting anything that happened before that.
Right.
Right? And as people, sophisticated marketers woke up to that fact, they said, okay, well, there's got to be some calculation that helps me derive what the value of all that stuff was that I did beforehand to drive to that conversion. And that's, kind of at a very high level what multi-touch attribution was designed to address. In the early days, companies like P&G were doing econometric modeling, and some of those principles actually were applied to the early phases of multi-touch attribution. Now, to your point, it's getting into even more sophisticated machine learning and AI to divine, okay, if I'm going to pump up a little bit more into the upper funnel, video, for example, through to display advertising, Facebook, what does that really mean? What does that investment that I topped up in one of those channels drive in terms of the ultimate revenue, or even better, the lifetime value of that customer?
Right. Okay.
And that, we're still kind of the middle innings of that, but it's becoming increasingly more sophisticated and really cool.
Yeah.
One of the things we spend a lot of time on, because we're now playing across multiple channels, display and search and Facebook, and testing a couple of others, and the data science guys love this, is, hey, if I had $1 more to spend on any of these channels, where would it go to drive maximal value?
Right.
And let's debate, what we think value is. Is it lifetime value of the customer? Is it just that transaction? But it's really cool and a ton of fun for our folks over in the data science world.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned artificial intelligence a moment ago. I was actually reading about a Nielsen event that happened last week where they were talking about the impact of artificial intelligence on ad buying, digital marketing. There's a quote from Jack Smith. He's the chief product officer for Group M, one of the big media agencies. And he said, even though our industry looks at clicks and other proxy measures as standards, when you apply AI and machine learning to that, you realize that they have very little to do with that outcome. Do you think artificial intelligence is going to play an important role in how we're gauging the ROI of campaigns?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And especially as things get more complex, I mean, it seems like it's the only path forward, right?
The machines will win, put it that way. You
even
can
in
only,
advertising.
Yeah, you can only do so much. I just think about my nearly 20 years in sort of the media space. And it used to be you would evaluate media plans on a quarterly basis, and then it was monthly, and then it was weekly, and then it was daily, and now it's like real time.
Yeah.
Hey, what's happening with my campaign all the way through to the ROI? Like, what's the absolute return on investment, depending on how I define it, for this campaign today, this minute, and that just wasn't possible, and I think it keeps going. So pretty soon you get into the self-optimizing loops where AI just takes over.
Yeah.
So you say, solve this problem for me. I want to sell as many airlines tickets as I possibly can over the next month. Like, take over.
Yeah. What is the flip side of that? Is there a flip side? There's been concerns over the past year, issues with brand safety, automated advertising creative appearing where we didn't want it to. Some issues with fraud. Certainly, they're not widespread. How do we get past that? Do you think that's a challenge that can be tackled?
Yeah. Yes, I do. And I think all of those that you just called out,
I would consider, kind of speed bumps along the way to the evolution of programmatic, which is effectively what we're talking about. So,
Right.
so buying media on a machine-to-machine basis and doing it intelligently. And many of the, think about any industry that's started. So the programmatic is 15 years old, and it's already the single largest percentage of digital media in display. And increasingly with Facebook, depending on how you define that, that's the way and that's exactly what search is. So I think those are kind of teething issues, and many of those have been resolved already. Yeah. Many more will be over time, and I think it ties back to the earlier comments about MTA, multi-touch attribution,
right?
Which is if I'm tracking to the ROI of that spend, however you define ROI, all those things melt, right? So if I can't see the ad, then that doesn't count, right? If there's fraud, I'm not going to drive to the conversion.
Yeah, makes sense.
Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Let's take a couple questions from the audience. Got a couple things up here from Slido. So first question, Sojern has developed 350 million data profiles of travelers, but other companies like Adar and Intent Media are too. Who wins?
We do, of course.
Final answer.
Yeah,
Okay.
No, I think this is, to my previous comment about the beginning of programmatic, is a huge market, right? And travel is a huge market, 1.3 trillion in booking value. So there's plenty of room for the three that are listed up here and a whole bunch more. We do things that are slightly different than those two. It probably doesn't make sense to spend a lot of time going into the nuance. I'm happy to address that for anyone who has specific questions.
Fair enough.
But there's tons of room, and we anticipate more and more people coming into this space.
Okay. Next question here. How do you measure the return on investment of social media, such as Facebook, Instagram? I'm also interested, as it relates to campaigns working with influencers, if you have any thoughts on that as well.
Right.
Everybody wants to talk about influencers. It's just always.
We take a pretty hard line on ROI. We tuned our algorithms, and our entire engine is based on driving effectively transactions. For the vast majority of our customers, we do some upper funnel kind of branding work, but we even track down to an ROI for that. So as we think about investing on our 6,000 customers globally on their behalf in Facebook, it's the same as search or display. We're driving to a return on investment as defined either by us or by our customer.
Right, okay. And are you finding that social media, just as a follow-on to that, is working more lower in the funnel now than maybe in the past it might have been used for more for branding campaigns or engagement versus now leading to conversions?
Our view is it's all. Yeah. It's all of that. So they're really powerful. If you're talking about Facebook as the proxy for social media, there are tools and products that they've rolled out that are really good at capturing, lower funnel, just retargeting. And I know this person is interested. I'm going to show them the right offer right now just to get them to hook.
Right.
And there's a lot of fantastic products and tools that they've built out to help influence at the top of the funnel. Right? Hey, let's get Jeremy, who we know likes to stay in 4-star boutique hotels, really interested in this new 4-star boutique hotel, in San Mateo, if they have them.
Cool. Well, listen, Mark, this has been a great discussion. I really appreciate you coming here today to join us. It's good.
Yeah.